Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. My special guest today is Mr. Mijit Litip, attorney at law at Kamalet Law Firm in the capital city, Urumqi. He is also the corporate representative of this law firm. Mr. Mijit, welcome to The Point. In 2001, you wrote an article about the role ethnic minority lawyers can play in fighting terrorism. You were speaking on a forum on lawyers in Western China, and that article received a lot of attention. What kind of trends were you already discerning that extremist thoughts already started to promulgate itself in Xinjiang?
改革开放的这个7、8年开始到20年。
During the first 2 decades of China's reform and opening up, from 1978 to 2000, the border crossings in Xinjiang were all opened. People from Xinjiang could go abroad, while foreign business people could also come in. Cross-border cultural and religious exchanges grew more frequently. Under these circumstances, some people who went abroad brought back extremist thoughts, while some foreigners who did business in Xinjiang also started to spread such thoughts. As a result, the religion that has long been followed in Xinjiang deviated from its original doctrines, and extremist religious thoughts started to promulgate. So actions had to be taken to stop and reverse this trend.
Why there was the soil for such extreme thoughts to promulgate rapidly throughout Xinjiang?
新疆呢，信伊斯兰教那差不多1000多年了。
People in Xinjiang have been practicing Islam for more than 1,000 years. Xinjiang used to be relatively closed off from the rest of the world. It's the case geographically. It's also true culturally, as it had very little open exchange with foreign countries. After reform and opening up, we opened border crossings on all sides.
没这个环境，没这个条件。改革开放以后，我们从8方开了口岸。 新疆有一个优势，和8个国家是零的。那是这些。
With its advantage of being adjacent to 8 countries, Xinjiang became more active in interacting with these countries. As more people flowed into and out of Xinjiang, the traditional Islam became an easy target for infiltration by some foreign extremist thoughts. Such thoughts were spread in the guise of Islamic doctrines.
没打这个疫苗，他没有这个方面的防御能力。 At
that time, the people of Xinjiang were not immunized against such ideological infiltration, so they did not have the ability to resist it, nor were they mentally prepared for it. The kind of blind worship of whatever was foreign, coupled with a lack of sophistication, made them very susceptible to such extremist thoughts. They didn't consider these thoughts to be extreme at all. They thought that Islam should be like that, so they imported Islamic fundamentalism to Xinjiang. Since people here were very susceptible to such thoughts, they got brainwashed and implanted with such ideology. Consequently, the extremist ideology took root and started to play a role in people's actions.
Were these kind of infiltration organized or organic?
有组织的也有，无组织的也有。比如来说。
There are organized ones as well as unorganized ones. For example, Hizb ut-Tahrir, a case I was involved in. It was actually brought to Xinjiang by 3 Uzbeks who were later sentenced to jail. I was involved in that case. I was in the courtroom, and when I sat through the hearing that day, I felt strange. The judge asked about their nationality, and they said they had no nationality. Then the judge asked which ethnic group they belonged to. They said they belonged to no ethnic group. They said wherever there was Islam, they were the people of that country. Wherever the Islamic community was being persecuted or oppressed, we go there to help them. They said that the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang were their compatriots, and that they were spreading this idea to lead them to the right path. This was what they said in court. As soon as I heard this, I knew the people from Hizb ut-Tahrir abroad came to Xinjiang to find followers and spread their radical thoughts to many people here. Eventually, I believe the number of their followers in Xinjiang reached several hundred thousand. The campaign actually started with these 3 people. In the end, one of them was sentenced to life imprisonment, 1 to 17 years in jail, and 1 to 14 years. From that case, I saw that there was organized infiltration into Xinjiang of extremist thoughts. In other cases, some people, whether on a pilgrimage or while abroad, came into contact with other Muslims, and when they learned that they all belonged to the Muslim community, they naturally picked up thoughts from each other. So I've noticed both organized and unorganized propagation of extreme thoughts.
When did the extreme thoughts become the worst?
I think the worst time was after 2000, when the tension culminated on July 5, 2009. Violent riots broke out and led to much bloodshed. I think that was the peak caused by the propagation of extremist thoughts. After that, we started to crack down on extremist thoughts and behaviors, and basically, there has not been a single case of such behaviors over the past 4 years. The crackdown worked.
What do you think of the role of the education and vocational training centers?
There are many people who have received education there. After receiving education, people experience a certain change in their thoughts and actions.
So what kind of role could people like you, lawyers from ethnic minorities from the Uyghur group, can play in preventing these extremist thoughts from gaining momentum?
In this struggle, lawyers from ethnic minority groups can play an irreplaceable role. The first reason is that they understand the local culture. Secondly, they can speak and write the local language and are part of the local community. Since lawyers often have at least a bachelor's degree, they will not accept such thoughts in the first place. From another perspective, by the very nature of their work, they have to defend ethnic minority suspects. Since Chinese law grants defendants the right to be defended, lawyers from ethnic minority groups have to represent and defend them. Although we do not agree with them ideologically, we have to protect their legal rights, which are provided in the law. And we are a country under the rule of law. So lawyers from ethnic minorities have a role to play in this.
So over the past 2 decades and beyond that you have been working as a lawyer, how have you been personally practicing what you just said to play a role, the important role of a Uyghur lawyer in the fight against extremism?
I have been a lawyer for more than 20 years, and for over half of that time, I happened to be working during the stage when China was cracking down on extremism and terrorism. So I've been working on related cases. Since I'm a criminal defense lawyer, I've been working on a lot of cases.
Do you remember how many?
Around a dozen of cases a year.
Over a few hundred in total.
Right. So, I have been involved in many cases, and I definitely had a role to play. Secondly, since the law protects the suspect's legitimate rights, I have to step up to the plate. I have to fulfill my duty and strive for a fair trial.
What would be your typical work? How would you go about helping to defend the rights, the legal rights of those suspects who carried out extreme terrorist attacks?
Most of the time, I rely on the laws of our country. Another thing I pay attention to is whether the evidence in the case is sufficient. I would push for a conviction based on evidence. That's why I spend more time on evidence and whether the characterization of the crime is based on the evidence. I put more effort into this aspect.
Are there enough legal basis for you to do your work properly, to give maximum justice to those who are being accused?
China's laws are rather comprehensive in this regard. This is not a big issue. It mainly depends on how the law is used. If it's used properly, their legitimate rights and interests can be fully protected. China has amended its laws to provide legal basis. For example, the 9th Amendment to the Criminal Law of the People's Republic of China enriched legal provisions in this regard. In the meantime, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region introduced regulations on de-radicalization and counterterrorism. The autonomous region also introduced related regulations, which were adopted by the local legislature. We rely on these laws and regulations to provide sufficient legal basis for settling cases.
What would happen if the accused have no financial resources to hire you or hire a lawyer at all?
Our country has regulations that provide legal aid for those who cannot afford to hire a lawyer. We take quite a few legal aid cases every year, and we don't charge to defend the accused.
What's the most difficult thing in defending these suspects?
The biggest challenge lies in their competency of sophistication. On average, they haven't even finished primary school. Therefore, they are very gullible. At the same time, everyone is equal before the law, and they will not be treated differently simply for this reason. So, there are times when I feel it is a bit difficult, because with such limited knowledge of the world, they don't know the consequences of their actions at all. And yet, they have committed the crime. So, it's a bit tricky in a legal context. People are equal before the law, but their levels of sophistication are not. I mean ignorance. This is the most difficult thing in defending them.
So you defended in some of the most infamous cases, such as the Tiananmen terrorist strike in 2013, in October 28th, and also the Urumqi railway station terrorist strikes on the 30th of April in 2014. During those cases, how did you handle these cases so that justice was done and the rights of the legitimate rights of these accused were also protected?
Cases like the Tiananmen terrorist attack were very rare. I was involved in the case to defend the suspects.
比较少是吧？
特别少这样的，因为天安门是我们国家的唯一的就是一个天安门，我们的心。
There are very few cases like this, because there is only one Tiananmen Square in China. This case happened in the heart of China, and I, as a Xinjiang Uyghur ethnicity lawyer, deplored whoever did this. I was involved in this case. I defended the suspects when the trial was held in Urumqi. I have a clear memory of how it happened. The man who hit the people with his car in Tiananmen Square and burned to death was a hell-bent extremist. His 90-year-old mother and his partner, who was 8 months pregnant, also burned to death in the car. He went way too far by doing this. I don't think anyone would accept such extremist thoughts. So he should be punished, and he punished himself by dying in the flames. I took part in the defense of the other suspects involved in this case when they stood trial, but during the defense, I also realized how ignorant some of them were. They did not even think about the consequences of their actions in the first place. And in the end, when they found out, it was too late to regret. The law is merciless.
有一些人确实是个思想特别愚昧，自己的后果自己开始他们就没想到，最后知道了一定后悔也来不及，法律是无情的。
How did you manage your emotions when you were dealing these cases?
我作为一个律师，必须尽责我的责任。
I have to fulfill my duty as a lawyer. Since I am a defender, I can't get emotional. I have to act in accordance with the law, and I can't do otherwise.
可是怎么也说，我还是作为一个人，我也有感情的。
But at the end of the day, I am still a human, and I have feelings. I sometimes have sympathy for the suspects. They have done things that are particularly immoral and harmful to humanity and themselves, but they just did it. Anyway, a fair trial is my starting point and ultimate goal.
How do your fellow Uyghur ethnic group people look at you? Because on the one hand, you are helping them, but on the other hand, you know, you are also sending some of them to prison.
社会是比较复杂的，各种人都在这个社会中。
The world is a complex place where different people are living together. So, for an extreme-minded person, I'm sure that my job may not be acceptable to him. But I believe that the vast majority of righteous people agree with me, because I am following the right path that leads to fair results in accordance with the law. Only a very small minority of people won't accept with what I do.
所以呢，他们不接受的还是继续说，绝大多数的呢还是赞成我这样做。
You have been watching a special edition of The Point with me, coming to you from Urumqi, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. We'll be back right after this short break. Have you done anything from the point of view of education so that the ordinary people, the masses, they are not so easy to be influenced by extremist thoughts?
这个方面呢，我们全疆的这个律师队伍。
This is an area where we as lawyers in Xinjiang have done a pretty good job. Why? We go to the rural areas and visit the local communities where we share knowledge about the law and provide education to de-radicalize people there. For example, I have taught lessons in Urumqi, Aksu, Kashgar, and Hotan, and I've gone to the countryside dozens of times so that the vast numbers of farmers and herdsmen are aware of the negative influence of extremist thoughts. In doing so, I can guide them onto the right track. We have done this a lot in this area, and I think the impact is very positive. There are many farmers who are deeply moved by our speeches, and I think this is very important.
首先，他的思想把他引导正确的轨道上来。我们去以前，当地的那个乡政府。
We contact the local village government before we go there. They help us to organize local farmers and prepare a meeting venue that can accommodate thousands of people, as well as meeting equipment such as microphones. Before we go there to make speeches, we prepare the topic and the content that can de-radicalize local farmers. When we make speeches, we talk in a plain language that the farmers can accept and understand. Besides, we have the advantage of being ethnic minority lawyers. In addition to knowing the native language, we also know the law, so we can teach them both the law and the right way of thinking. It's easy for them to accept. Moreover, they are particularly interested in some of the cases that we have handled, and we share the cases with them directly.
而且是我们办案当中的有一些案例，我们直接给他们讲，特别愿意听他们。
What's their reaction?
反应非常不错。
It's very good. Some of them come to us after we finish speaking. Some ask for our phone numbers, and they contact us directly when they have legal problems. Anyways, I think it's working very well.
我认为是呢，这个效果还是非常好的。
What has to be done to increase the resistance towards extremist thoughts?
我认为呢，新疆伊斯兰教有一定的基础的，上千年的历史。
Islam is a faith that has deep roots in Xinjiang. It has been around for over 1,000 years. As I have said, the problem is not just about faith or culture or tradition. It's a mix of all of them. So, it's unrealistic to erase radical thoughts in one broad stroke, as some thoughts have seeped into people's minds and souls. Therefore, it takes time to stamp them out. I think we have to be scientific in dealing with them. On the one hand, we should respect local people's customs and traditions. On the other hand, since our Constitution grants people the right to freedom of belief and freedom of non-belief, we should allow them to enjoy this freedom. Our party guides them through the right channels. If they still do illegal things, they will be punished and held accountable according to the law. Generally speaking, we will respect their beliefs, customs, and culture in accordance with the law, so that they can blend into the Chinese culture. This requires a certain process and cannot be done in a broad brush manner. It's not black and white. It certainly cannot be done with a blind and rough approach. Otherwise, the result may not be good.
不是那么简单的事情，所以这个不能盲目的、粗暴的方式来解决。那个 结局是不一定是完全是好的。
What kind of role can education play?
教育是很关键的作用。
Education can play a very crucial role because among the cases I have handled, very few of the defendants have college education. It's less than 1 to 2%. The rest basically have only gone to primary school. Some couldn't even write their names. Their lack of education makes them prone to fall for tricks. So we have to focus on educating people. Nowadays, bilingual education is going very well. With good literacy in both Mandarin and the native language, many children will have the ability to distinguish between right and wrong.
What do you think has to be done in order for there to be long-term stability in Xinjiang?
我认为这个方面还需要巩固，还是依靠法律。
To consolidate what has been done, we need to rely on the law. The long-term stability in Xinjiang needs to be cemented by law. Local people, especially farmers and herdsmen, need to be better educated about the law and about what is illegal and what is legal. Once they know this, they will pay attention to it, which is good for long-term security and stability.
稳定是有一定的好处的。同时呢，第二个问题，我自己的观点来说，稳定的基础还是法监。
Secondly, from my own point of view, the very foundation of stability is still development.
跟不上。
The economy has to grow, otherwise stability will be built on sand. As the general situation becomes stable, we should do our best to grow Xinjiang's economy and increase people's sophistication. Only then can a solid foundation for stability be established. On the surface, there haven't been any riots in Xinjiang over the past 4 years. But if we look beyond that, I think this is not enough. We need further economic development and better education to solidify this foundation in order to have long-term stability.
才能长期的这样有基础呢。
What principles do you follow when you choose which case to represent or not as an agent?
方式的角度来说呢，我认为老百姓能够接受的。
In terms of specific measures, I think it's to provide people with what they are willing to accept. The reasonable elements in their own culture and customs should be supported. There are some areas where we shouldn't jump to conclusions, and there are some issues that need to be explored further.
在过于的早度是比较急躁的下结论，有一些问题需要还进一步的探讨呢。
How many ethnic Uyghur lawyers are there in Xinjiang? Are there enough?
你看有一个数字我可以说明。
There is a set of figures I used to explain. In Xinjiang, there are more than 5,000 lawyers, including about 1,200 lawyers from ethnic minority groups. The share of ethnic minority lawyers is not proportionate to the percentage of ethnic minority population in Xinjiang. Now, the population of Xinjiang is more than 20 million, including over 10 million ethnic minorities, which accounts for about 60% to 62% of the total population. However, the share of ethnic minority lawyers is only around 20%. So 20% of the lawyers serve 60% of the population in Xinjiang, while the other 80% of lawyers serve only 40% of the population. It shows that the team of ethnic minority lawyers needs to grow. Secondly, the professionalism of the lawyers from the ethnic minority groups needs to be enhanced, because they mostly deal with litigation cases, and they have little experience with non-litigation cases.
非诉讼案基本上没有。
What does it mean?
这个重要是这个环境，比如来说，少数民族律师就是我这样的就是。
Let's put this into context. For example, ethnic minority lawyers like me mainly go to court. Very few lawyers from ethnic minority groups can get into the financial industry, real estate, or mining. Why? First of all, they have little experience in these areas, so there is a need to further expand their expertise. In addition, there are not many ethnic minority people working in those industries, and the lawyers mostly handle litigation cases. So, their experience is very limited. I'm an exception because I have skill advantages. I was a senior economist, and I graduated from a university with a degree in Chinese literature and then a master's degree in law. So I have an advantage over other lawyers in terms of the breadth of knowledge. I can make a more in-depth analysis of problems. Other lawyers may not be able to do the same. It usually takes about 10 years for a law school graduate to become a lawyer. During that process, many lawyers cannot even make a living. Their solution? They change professions. They would take exams to become civil servants. That's why the team of ethnic minority lawyers hasn't grown.
考试呢，上去公务员，这个比较好的出路，所以这个队伍呢，成不了的原因就在这。
But this team is growing, however.
5年前新疆律师
There were over 1,000 lawyers in Xinjiang 5 years ago. Now the number is over 5,000. It shows that the team has grown very rapidly.
就是非常快的。
How many would be
邓
good?
小平说过是30万律师。
Deng Xiaoping said that 300,000 lawyers would be enough for China. Now, there are around 500,000 lawyers in China, and I think it's still not enough. If the country is governed by the rule of law, this number may need to be greatly increased. Why? President Xi Jinping has said that the cadres must study the law. If China is to be governed by the rule of law, cadres must first learn the law, and there must be legal practitioners among them. If not, officials tend to solve problems by administrative means and don't know how to use applicable laws. There can't be the rule of law either. There is a need to further build the team of lawyers, especially ethnic minority lawyers. Therefore, I think the state should allocate some funds to send young ethnic minority lawyers for training into more developed areas. Only then will the professionalism of this team be greatly improved.
然后反馈了以后，肯定这个队伍的这个业务素质方面有很大的改善的。
Would you retire?
你英语讲完吧。
I never consider age to be a factor. I'll be 68 years old in June of this year. I never think about my age, be it 68 or 78. It's the same for me. If I am still fit to work, I will not retire and I will continue working.
我不会退，继续奋斗下去。
Thank you very much, Mr. Lijit. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Urumqi, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Thank you for watching. You've got The Point.